Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Bandle Banter. Today we have a very special guest and one that's been very much requested from our community. We're going to be talking to Prismat to give a quick overview of Prismat's accomplishments. They're extremely well seasoned both online and in real life. He's finished second at Riftlab Trials 2, placed 6th at SCGCon Las Vegas and made a top 8 64 finish at the Houston Regional Qualifier. That's, quite a lot of accomplishments you've got going on there, and trying to get them all out into an intro is quite the challenge. So I'm really, really grateful to have you around today. How are you getting on?
Yeah, I'm not doing too badly. I think I wish I could have carried over a bit more success from online into in-person, but one thing that I do want to say is that it is my first serious physical card game that I'm competing in. I've competed...
Really? That's a real shock to me that this is, considering how well you've been doing in terms of like your online performance and even to real life, like to speak volumes that you took Teemo when everybody was saying, hey, Teemo's a bit of a meme and it's the deck you play for fun. Like you were the dream maker for so many players who wanted Teemo to be good. So I am shocked to hear that you've never dabbled in Magic, Lorcana, Yu-Gi-Oh, or some other form of cardboard crack.
Well, I've dabbled, but primarily I'm an online gamer, like online competitor.
Yeah.
So I've played some MTG, like casual, like Friday Night Magic when I was a teenager, and I did go to a couple of small Flesh and Blood events in person. But in general, like even Flesh and Blood or MTG, I've grinded them online a decent amount to get good at them, but never went to any in-person events to really compete seriously.
Yeah, I never actually got around to playing Flesh and Blood, to be honest. I think I saw bits and pieces of it. I had a few friends that were really into it, and I know you were really big on Heroes of the Storm, and I adored that game. I was never that great at it. I played Nazebo back when he was broken. You just did the quest and then you hit them with spiders and they died. But you actually played at a proper top tier level on that as well, right?
Yeah, I was a professional player in Heroes of the Storm for 2 years, back when they were running the HGC Heroes Global Championship. And then I was on one of the top teams in North America. We went to compete internationally a few times, went to one BlizzCon, and it was just a great experience overall. Missed that game. Hopefully Microsoft brings it back.
I really hope so too. I was obsessed with all of the Blizzard IPs, and bringing it into a MOBA was a genre I was very much appreciated of. So we have a bit of a new thing that we're doing with the channel, and that is my opening question before we jump into all of the good stuff with Teemo is that the previous guest left a question for you, and at the end I'll ask you for a question to pass on. I have shamelessly stolen this from Diary of a CEO because I think it's fantastic, but your question is from Gelwins, and their question was, why do you use a playmat?
I think a more seasoned card game player would know the actual answer for it. I guess for me, there's some idea of protecting your cards if the table is dirty, but none of the tables were really unclean at all at the events. They all had tablecloths over them, and it could have easily just played without a playmat. So I guess I'd say the main reason is just to show off. I have the Blitzcrank playmat from the one skirmish I went to that I won, and then I've got a couple of other cool playmats that I've gotten along the way.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like people will actually gauge what level of player you are based on the kind of playmat you put out. Like you can spook people by rolling out like a World of Warcraft trading card game regionals mat when you're playing at a Yu-Gi-Oh event, and they're like, oh, this player was good at a different game, maybe I'm playing a good player. Like there's mind games behind it, but there is a real question. It's like, why do we actually use playmats? It's just, I thought that was a fun one. Let's actually dive into the meat and potatoes and why everybody's here today. And I want to know what originally drew you to Teemo, considering that you were the pioneer of Darius Hook and pretty much put that deck on the map. And I originally thought that was exactly what I was going to be getting you on for, and then I found out you were playing Teemo, and I was like, oh, that is so much better. So what got you on the Teemo?
Okay. I could start a little bit with Darius Hook.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I was the pioneer. I guess I was the one that really popularized it and got the initial success with it, but I do want to give credit to Nick Danger. I think it was the very first Riftbound Meta Weekly that I played in. I was playing Jinx, and then I ran into him playing Hook Darius, and I ended up beating him, but the one game where he actually drew Hook and then the deck actually functioned was not even close. And that really impressed me, like how strong the deck was. So then I picked up the deck and then brought it to several tournaments after that, and then had success with it. And then the reason that I switched off of it is it does have some consistency issues. Partly it's reliant on drawing the hook, but that's not even the biggest issue with it. You can draw a hook pretty consistently, and even when you don't, the deck still functions pretty well. The big issue is drawing the units that you put in the deck to be pulled with hook. So the Red Draven and Spectral Matron.
Oh yeah, those are tough.
Whenever you have opening hands with those, that's really when the deck doesn't function at all. Like, as long as your hand doesn't have those, doesn't have too many of those, you can still play a pretty solid aggro deck with your effectively one extra rune off of the Darius Legend ability. But it's when you draw those, even when you do draw a hook alongside them, that's when you really fall apart.
Yeah, it's kind of hard over a long tournament such as Houston, 9 rounds, where consistency is king, to have something that can just draw you a hand that just outright loses the game. That would be really tough. So you transitioned over from that to Teemo. I do have screen share on for the call that we're on, so you can actually see exactly what I'm pointing at as we're talking. We're also on Spotify, so for any of our listeners there, very grateful for you. So we'll do our best to describe what's going on if we're looking at cards and that, just so that you can follow along if you're traveling around in the world and you're like, I have no idea what that card is. But
okay, so the starting point for the deck for me was I really liked Rasa the Sunderer, and then I also really liked Dr. Mundo. I wanted to build a deck that could enable both of those. So for anyone who doesn't know, Rasa the Sunderer is a 10-cost 6 might unit that costs 1 less for every card in your trash. So if you can get 10 cards in your trash, he's free. Well, with 1 rune cost. And Dr. Mundo, 8-cost, 2 power cost, 6 might unit. Might is increased by the number of cards in your trash. So both of them have the same goal, and both of them are really strong if you can get them enabled. So the original idea was, I think I had 3 Rasas in the main deck, and then 2 or 3 Mundos in the main deck. And I ended up on Teemo because he is blue and purple. And then I wanted to use as many 1-cost spells as possible. There are no 1-cost units in the game.
Not yet.
So whatever I could do to fill my trash as quickly as possible. So the original deck, it still has 3 stack decks, still has 3 Stupefies, but it also had 3 Gust. And then since you can hide cards for 1 mana, that is effectively 1 mana cost units, 1 mana cost spells, as long as you hide them. So that was the original idea. I think it was close to the release of the game in the West. I don't remember when exactly. I brought it to 1 tournament, and it performed a lot better than expected. And then I moved on from it for a bit, but then came back to it later on when they announced the top placement prizes for Houston, where bringing an underrated and underrepresented deck like this would be a lot more valuable than just bringing Kaisa and competing with all the Kaisa players.
Yeah, I can completely respect that. I heard from Galewins and from a few other people that the best of metal cards were going for an absolute premium. I think numbers close to $45,000 were thrown around for some of them. And I was like, okay, I can definitely understand why somebody would want to take a side quest with a lesser known champion, or rather lesser respected champion, I should say. A team I think is very well known. And it's a deck that everybody wanted to be good. And what's really interesting is I feel like people have kind of filtered into 2 versions of Teemo. You had the Peekaboo Teemo, which is basically just playing a bunch of hidden cards in Nocturnes, which just kind of didn't really work. You have no consistency, and even when you get the Nocturne, you're like, I'd rather this was something else. And then we've got like Dance Dance Revolution Mundo, or DDR Mundo, with all of the movement spells. Although, interestingly, we will talk that you don't play Ride the Wind, or just a lot of movement tech and just making the Mundo being able to jump from battlefield to battlefield and just clean up all the points. But Mundo wasn't respected initially when the card was revealed for the first releases either, was it? It was something where everyone just went, this card doesn't seem good. And you showed them wrong with some stellar finishes just on the Teemo deck in the last, two of the big events? Houston and Vegas?
Yeah, I got the top 8 at Vegas, and then top 64, barely missing out on the top placement. If I had just played a bit better in my top 64 match, then I would have gotten to top 32 and won the top placement for Teemo. Just unfortunately didn't get there on tiebreakers. There was another Teemo player that went 7 wins, 2 draws in day 1. So they placed better than me at the end.
So rough. That is so rough.
No,
I mean, it was
quite painful.
It was interesting to see that the metagame was a little bit different, right? With a lot of Annie being represented at Houston, when in the Chinese tournaments we didn't see any Annie, and then we had the top 8 had 4 Annies in it. So our format was very different from what we had grown accustomed to. And I could imagine if you were an Annie player and you didn't get the card when you made the top cut, you were like, this shouldn't be happening. I should have definitely got that.
It's crazy that the top placing Kaisa got top 8, and then, top placing Annie got first. I guess considering how strong the deck is, it's not too surprising, but definitely was not expecting that many to be at Houston.
Yeah, it was a very, very different field for sure compared to what all the estimations were. So let's talk a little bit about the deck identity and the win condition for this deck. So are we kind of an aggro deck? Are we more tempo, control? Like, how do you actually win games with this deck?
So it depends on the matchup. The main idea, especially with the expected metagame of Kaisa and Yi going into Houston, is that Mundo is the win condition. Basically, the only cards that can deal with Mundo when he gets big enough are in yellow and purple, and Kaisa and Yi don't have access to those colors. So the best that they could do is an Acathian Rain or a White Flame Protector, which is often not enough to deal with Mundo on their own. So that's the win condition for those matchups. Against the yellow or purple deck, something like Victor or Annie, you can't rely on Mundo the same way. They have access to Rebuke or Hidden Blade, or Vi, Ride the Wind. Vi is very often bigger than the Mundo is. So then you have to transition to more of a tempo deck, even an aggro deck, where you have to match their pace and really just beat them early on with your smaller units.
So you kind of definitely shift. You've got a real good grasp of, there's an old article, I'm trying to remember the person who wrote it, called Who's the Beatdown? It was a Magic the Gathering article, and it was basically trying to describe, you need to figure out if you are the aggressor or if you're the defender, effectively.
Yeah. I mean, you could say that it's a control deck, but it speeds up a lot in the faster matchups. You're still going to be slower than them. You're still going to win by putting up a wall that they can't push through most of the time, but you're expected to do that a lot faster.
Which I really like. So I like actually playing cards in the earlier stages of the game. I think there's a lot of older control decks from card games way back when you'd have control decks generally just not doing anything for the first couple of turns of the game, but you can't do that in Riftbound. You kind of have to be playing cards and doing stuff, otherwise your opponent's going to get too much of a points lead. So I do really like being able to have some of this top end like Mundo, and then you've got a lot of the smaller cards, so you've got a lot of action that's going on in the early stages of the game. So how does your early game tend to look out? What are you trying to do in the early, mid, and late stages? Like when you break a game down that way, what's your general objective?
Okay, in the early game, the most important thing, you have to get on a battlefield. That can be difficult in some matchups, but if you never get on a battlefield, then that's just unfortunate. But you get on a battlefield, you get a Teemo down, that's your first big power card. You're paying 1 mana for a 4-might unit effectively when you're defending. And that's so efficient that it makes up for the drawback of being the defender, because in general in this game, being the defender, your opponent knows how much they have to beat, and if they beat you, then they get a huge swing, killing stuff for free effectively. So that's the early game. In the mid game, want to start setting up Ember Monks. That's the next big power card, where you get a 6-might unit for 4 without a power cost, and then it can get even larger than that with multiple hidden cards. And then once you get to the late game, you put down the Dr. Mundo, and then with the couple of Fighter Flights and Tide Turners and the Guerrilla Warfare, you're able to move him around and keep control of both battlefields, keep the opponent from keeping any units.
Makes sense. Do you remember what the biggest Mundo you made during Houston was?
I think I had one that was bigger than 20, maybe a couple. It was never anything too crazy. There were a lot of games where I had to play him much earlier, where he was maybe 13 might or so.
13 is
probably the most common. 13 to 16 might is the most common.
Pretty respectable. I can definitely be scared of that. Oh, for sure.
When he's backed up by some hidden cards, or some other spells, or even just a Stupefy, which takes 1 might from their unit and gives 1 to the Mundo. Yeah,
it messes with the math, because you keep putting new cards into the trash as you're playing them, which then can really throw people off.
Yeah, he's always a lot bigger than he looks. Like, especially, like, you play him, he's 13, you start your next turn, he goes down to 10, but he's not really 10. He's at least 13. He's probably going to be bigger than that by the opponent's turn.
Yeah,
or if you need to attack with him into something.
He makes the hand reading very obnoxious, because you're like, okay, my opponent actually has more they can do than I was expecting, because he can just randomly gain stats by them just doing other stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the battlefields. What is your game 1 battlefield? So before you sit down, you see your opponent, where you're starting off. What's the goal here?
Okay, game 1 is Zon Morans. The main idea is it lets me fill up my trash more for Mundo to get him online earlier. There is one scrap heap in the deck, which could even go up to 2 potentially, but it is a bit risky. It can clog up hands a bit. The other main idea of Zon Warrens is that there are a few one-ofs in the deck. There's the scrap heap, there's a gust, there's a smoke screen, and these cards are a lot worse in some matchups than others. So having these one-ofs means that if I don't want them and I draw them, I can get rid of them as Zon Warrens. The deck also plays 2 Sprite Calls and 2 Sprite Mothers, which can be very bad in certain matchups, like against Master Yi.
Oh, yeah.
But very important in many other matchups. So being able to get rid of these with the Zon Warrens in game 1 before they all get sideboarded out in those matchups is also very nice. There is one issue with Zon Warrens, which is Annie plays 3 scrap heaps and also wants to do Zon Warrens game 1. I thought about you could do some kind of mind game where if they don't know you're playing Zon Warrens, you don't play it game 1, and then you bring it on a later game when they hopefully have sideboarded out their scrap heaps, but it's a bit risky to do. So I just decided to keep playing it on game 1 regardless.
Yeah, I can imagine a double Zon Warrens game is probably not... I'm wondering if it would be harder, I guess maybe with Annie, because they just have, as you said, more scrap heaps and stuff. But Zon seems to be very popular, at least with some of the people I've spoken to, for exactly that reason, because it lets you take toolbox options into your deck with just small quantities so that you can just throw out if you don't need them. You've got a little bit of extra chance of drawing them, and obviously it's extra profit with Mundo. Looking at the other battlefields, I guess when you're going first, it's always the Bandle tree. Like, I can't imagine that this is not the one that you're going to first, but please enlighten me.
It is the one going to first. It's a battlefield that you could play when you go second. The issue, though, is that your opponent knows your game plan. They're going to go there first and stop you from getting there. So even though they won't get any benefit from going there themselves, they're going to deny you a lot of benefit. And when you go first, you get here, you could either play a 2-drop and then hide 2 cards there, or just hide 1 card and then hide another card later, and then play Ember Monk on turn 3, and the Ember Monk is already 8 might. Snowballs out of control very quickly if your opponent doesn't have a Hextech Ray or a Gust to stop you from getting there in the first place.
Yeah, this card is really interesting. Just being able to hide an extra card is something we just can't do on any of the other battlefields, and it lets you play generally more of them. I think that was one of the problems with the Peekaboo Teemo, is that you'd have so many hidden cards, but you could usually only ever play 1 a turn because your opponent would have the side that you didn't hide stuff at. And you're like, okay, I'm bunkered up over here and I can't get stuff down. But Bandle just lets you play a lot more of your cards more efficiently.
Yeah,
and
it fixes the drawback of Consult the Past, where normally hiding Consult the Past leaves your battlefield vulnerable for that turn before you can play it. But if you're on Bandle Tree, if you can only afford to hide 1 hidden card, you could hide your Teemo first, protect the battlefield, make sure you have it next turn, and then hide the Consult the Past with the Teemo, if your opponent doesn't force you to flip him. And then, even if they do, then you still have the room to hide the Consult and hide another card.
Yeah, being able to not fall behind on card pacing whilst also actually having something your opponent has to worry about and respect seems really solid. The one battlefield that you've got playing here that really caught me off guard was the Trifarian War Camp. We usually see this with the all units here get +1 might in strategies more like Victor or Darius Hooker, where you're going on a very go wide plan. And this was really interesting to me why this is your going second battlefield then.
Yeah, so this was a tech idea from Kuvi originally, and the idea is the hardest matchup for this deck is Kaisa, and especially when you go second, it is very rough. The reason for that is even if you set up your ideal turn 2 battlefield, which is a 2-draw that got to the battlefield, and then an Ember Monk, and then a Teemo that's hidden there, that's 12 might total. And unfortunately, Kaisa, with just their champion unit and base, can very easily push that. There's a lot of 2-card combinations they can use. They could have a Darius with a Cleave, they could have a Falling Star with a Void Seeker or a Hextech Ray or a Smokescreen. Just any combination of those cards will clear that battlefield, and then you have nothing on board, nothing in your base. They have control of both battlefields. They've scored 3 points already, and the game is basically over at that point. So the War Camp helps out with that, and then it also helps out with a lot of breakpoints. Falling Star doesn't kill Ember Monk anymore. Void Seeker can't kill Ember Monk when it attacks into the battlefield. Hextech Ray can't kill a student, or it's risky to try to play it if I have a Stupefy available to give it +1 and make it go up to 4. And sprites also begin to survive Hextech Rays. And then it's also a big breakpoint for a 2-drop with just Teemo, normally that would be 6, and a Kaisa with Cleave would be 7, or a Darius would be 7. But on War Camp, the 2-drop has 3 might, and the Teemo has 5 might, whereas the Kaisa with Cleave is only 8 might, so then they start trading with each other. There's a lot of breakpoints. It makes a really big difference in the Kaisa matchup, and then similarly with the Annie matchup as well, because they have a lot of card overlap.
That's actually really cool. Just being 1 point out of our opponent's efficient removal range just gives us so much room to make the Kaisa have to do more valuable removal spells, I guess, during their actual turn, as opposed to using it at action speed, because you can't just go, okay, I'm going to rely on this Hedge Tech Raid to stop my opponent actually getting set up. And Teemo is very hard to displace once he locks something down. So I actually really like this. I'm going to try and carry that over to some of my deck building.
And it's an idea that I think Ari decks originally used. Presto in Riftlab Trials 2 was using it. And partly you also get the Ari upside, where 1 might units that attack into this battlefield will still get the Ari debuff applied to them, which is valuable, but it is also the Kaisa breakpoints for Ari, because she has a similar issue where her units can just get removed by the spells before they get to see a combat.
Yeah, that's the general format issue. It's just the removal is so efficient in Kaisa, and the usual drawbacks to playing that removal would be paying power costs, which you just don't do in that deck. So having a battlefield, a card you don't have to draw that really interacts with that, that's a really cool idea. I really like that.
And then one other thing too, as long as you're not playing against a yellow deck, you still use this battlefield better than other decks in the format. Since you have access to effectively 1 mana units with hidden cards, hiding a Teemo or hiding a Tide Turner or a Sprite, and you also have this density of cheap units along with card draw, you're very often able to stack more units on the battlefield than your opponent can use to attack you with. Especially like a deck like Master Yi, he doesn't want to ever put more than 1 unit on this battlefield, even if he gets there first.
Yeah, that's a complete waste of value on Master Yi. If you can make Master Yi team attack into you, you're generally in a really good spot in that matchup. But that's really awesome. Let's move into the main deck and talk about the core package. So we want to cover things like, what cards can you not remove from the deck because the deck just would refuse to function if you took them out?
Okay. Well, first of all, you have Teemo Scout as the chosen champion. You have to have 1 of him.
Yep.
I have 2. I think that he is very strong. And one thing that's interesting to note, you never want to play him as your 2-drop. He is a 2-drop, but since hiding him is so much stronger than playing him as the unit, you always want to avoid that. But one thing that's nice is if you draw the second one, you could actually play the chosen champion Teemo. And then as long as you hide the second Teemo alongside him, it ends up being pretty similar overall to if you had played another 2-drop. Since if your opponent attacks into that battlefield, they're going to trade probably their unit into your face-up unit, and then the Teemo that was hidden will survive. Or if your opponent has a removal spell, then it doesn't really matter if you had 1 might or 2 might. It'll end up being the same result. So that's one nice upside, where this is effectively a 9 2-drop deck.
Yeah, I love that. It's just like +4 might, and it's so relevant in the early stages of the game, and it plays into one of your Legends abilities as well, right, where you can just pick it back up after it's done its job and held a battlefield, and you can get that value again. Yeah,
the ability to pick it back up means that you always have a hidden card available for your Ember Monk, and then even just a 1 might unit surviving, he goes back into your base. Can often be better than picking him back up as well, where he can get into an open battlefield and start setting back up again, or he can be the first unit that pushes in to take the removal spell before something else actually gets there.
Yeah, I can imagine your opponent's not feeling too happy having to Void Seeker a Teemo to stop you setting up shop there. That's... Okay, so we've got 2 copies of Teemo, because again, normally we only see 1 Teemo in the Chosen, and people tend to just play it as their 2-drop so that they can get to a battlefield. But I do like the idea of you're wasting an energy to do that.
People get caught off guard. They don't expect the second Teemo a lot of the time.
Just because of that, right? Because we've gotten so familiar with just a 1 Teemo and Chosen and just not playing additional copies, even though he seems pretty nuts, actually. 4 might is a lot.
Yeah, for 1 mana. Like a deck like Victor can't deal with that, which is the nice thing. Like the decks that deal with Mundo can't deal with a face-down Teemo.
Hilarious. You wouldn't have... In terms of like size and lore and stuff, it's like, oh yes, the little Yordle's the biggest problem, not the giant lumbering guy with a cleaver who has 1 million might. It's just the hidden card that you can interact with. So what else? What else in here could we just like not remove, or if we removed it, the deck would just not be good?
Well, stack deck, the very next card.
Oh yeah,
this is very important. It allows you to find the right card for the situation. Sometimes you're looking for a hidden card. Sometimes you're looking for a sprite. Sometimes you're just looking for your Dr. Mundo. This is the card that specifically allows you to run only 2 Dr. Mundos in the deck. If it didn't exist, you would have to run 3 to be consistent. But since you have this card, basically every game you see at least half of your deck, which means that your odds are quite high to be able to find 1 copy of Mundo. And then in addition, it's a 1-mana spell, so it fills your discard. And it also synergizes with the Ravenbloom Student very well. I think this deck is, I guess, the second best deck in the game at enabling Ravenbloom Student after Ari.
Yeah, Ravenbloom in Ari is sick when you can just play Discipline and it jumps up to 5 might, and it's like, oh, that's a big one. But stack deck, I was actually, when I was talking to Gail, I was like, I really would like to see an overnumbered stack deck with like Twisted Fate on the art or something. I think that would be a chase card, like considering like the stack deck.
That would be really cool.
Incredible.
Maybe when they make the Twisted Fate legend.
I am curious to see how they do that, because he has an effect that you kind of can't
if he'll
resolve.
be 3 colors.
Yeah, I think he'll be the first 3-color legend. Like, that's what I'm hoping for.
And he'd be Chaos and Order at the same time. That'd be interesting.
Make the rune deck layout completely crazy. But, okay, so we've got Teemo, stacked deck. I would also guess the Ember Monks are a big part of this.
Yeah, we could go right to the Ember Monk.
Oh, no, let's do it in your order. Let's do it in your order. It's
okay, well, let's just do it in mana cost order. So Stupefy.
Sure.
And this card is, I don't think there's a blue deck that exists that doesn't play 3 of this card. It's only a 1 might swing, but 1 might is the only, that's the difference between one of your or your opponent's units living or dying very often. And then, again, works with Ravenbloom Student, fuels Mundo. And then when Mundo's in play, it's a 2-point swing. So it's just a very sick card. And then we go down to the 2-drops. Traveling Merchant, he's always been in the deck. He allows more card filtering, fills up for Mundo. And then if you draw too many late game cards, he gets rid of them. If you draw too many 2-drops, he gets rid of them. Helps out with the consistency as well.
Fun little side note on the Traveling Merchant. This was like one of the first cards I saw for Riftbound when I started to investigate the game. Go, is this for me? When I read this card, I actually realized that the game designers knew what they were doing. Like, this was what put my faith in the game, was this, the way this card was written, discard, then draw, and it's on move. It just felt like a lot of thought has gone into what this unit needs to be in the early stages and not just drop off massive value. And I could see a lot of the design in there, even without looking at other cards, because you can kind of already figure out what the space is. And I think Traveling Merchant was perfect for that, and it was one of the reasons that I did continue like looking at the game and really got into it, even though I love League of Legends and stuff like that. I think this card is just excellent in every aspect.
Yeah, I do think it is really interesting where a lot of the 2-drops are really utility based rather than just trying to have bigger numbers. Where, I mean, there's a few of them, Ravenbloom Student we're about to talk about, where it's has bigger numbers than more than 2 might as a 2-drop. But a lot of the other ones, and a lot of the good 2-drops are just have useful effects while they have 2 might.
Yeah, something that
makes
gives
things
you
a lot more interesting.
They give you utility. It's not just, okay, I'm playing a 2/2 Grizzly Bear and passing. It's like, it's a 2-drop that has reasonable stat line and some sort of utility that's actually useful either long term or in the immediate short term. And I think that's really good design for our 2-drops.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Next we go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Got Ravenbloom Student. So since we have the stack decks and Stupefies, and then in addition to that, any hidden spell is effectively a 1-mana spell. It's very common that you can turn a Ravenbloom Student into a 4 or 5 might unit at some point in the game. So that's one of the big power cards that, when it gets drawn alongside the spells, can really get you a big advantage.
Yeah, I love Ravenbloom.
And it's also,
Ravenbloom Student.
The deck has some issues attacking, and Ravenbloom Student is the, I guess, second best attacking unit in the deck after Thousand-Tailed Watcher. Where it can sit in base, and your opponent has to be quite concerned that it's going to be larger than they expect.
Yeah, I hate attacking into Ravenblooms because, like, even if you've got a 4 might unit, it's like 1 Stupefy, and you've just traded, and they've drawn a card for the Stupefy as well, and you've lost a lot of tempo off of that.
Yeah, you can create similar situations to Kaisa, where a Kaisa has a Ravenbloom Student go to a battlefield and then sits there with 4 mana open. You're just, okay. I guess I'm not pushing that battlefield this turn.
Yeah, I guess you're getting that hold point, sir. I'll let you have that one.
The next core card, Guerrilla Warfare.
Oh, I want to talk about this one because like almost no Teemo lists are ever really playing this nowadays because everyone's on the Mundo strat, but this is a card that I think is really cool.
This has always been 1 in the deck, but originally my idea was to run Bandle Tree game 1 and then sideboard this Guerrilla Warfare out for the 3rd Fight or Flight. What I realized is that it's actually just such a strong effect that you want to have 1 copy in the deck at all times, and then just gives you so many choices where you get back Fight or Flight, probably the most important card, most impactful late game hidden card. But it can just get back a Teemo, get back an accelerated Sprite with Sprite Call. So it gives you a ton of options in the late game, and then as a one-of, you can always discard it if you draw it too early on before you have the hidden cards in trash.
I guess that's kind of a bit of a game philosophy question, I'd say, is when do you make the decision to discard like power cards like Guerrilla Warfare? Adding up 2 hidden cards from your trash and then being able to hide for 0 cost for a turn, very, very good card. So, but when you're in that tournament setting where it's like a case of like, okay, even though this is a great card, I need to throw it out here. Like, how do you make that decision with the Traveling Merchant, let's say?
I think the biggest thing to think of is if you're going to be able to play it probably by your next turn, because 2 turns in the future is just too far away to be able to count on it. So you just can't be too greedy with your discards. That was something with the deck originally when I had 3 Rossas in the main deck, and it would be my trash would be empty. It'd be my first discard trigger off of a Merchant or a Zonwarns, and I'd look at the Rossas and I'd think to myself, oh, these guys they're gonna be free one day, so I can't discard them. I've got to set up this Rossa the Sunderer combo where I just get to 10 cards in trash and slam 2 of them and win the game. And then they would be sitting in my hand for the next 5 turns and I would just lose the game. So it's much better just have cards that you can actually play, be able to spend your mana every turn and not fall too far behind, because that's really how you lose the game with this deck.
Yeah, tempo in general is a huge thing because you play your units and you've got movement, and there's a lot more aspects where you have to kind of be doing something every turn. So I can definitely agree throwing out the bigger stuff. I mean, it's always hard when you have to throw out a Raza because you give that away that it's in your deck and your opponent's then constantly keeping an eye on your trash. And it's like, it is what it is. It's either I get rid of this now and my opponent becomes aware of it for future games in the set, or, I just hold on to this card I'm not going to play. Is the information better than having a playable card? And I guess in that situation, just having the playable card is much better.
Okay, next we've got Fight or Flight. This one I'm actually thinking about playing a 3rd copy of, because I think I really underestimate how important it is in the early and mid game. Just spending 2 mana to deny your opponent a point can be.
Decides games. This card is insane.
Yeah, it really does. The best use case of this card is with Dr. Mundo, where you hide it alongside him. If your opponent tries to push into the Mundo, you can either push back one of their units so the Mundo wins the combat, or you can push him back to your base to save him and then counter swing with a Watcher on the next turn. Or if they don't attack into the Mundo at all, you use it to push him back to your base and have him attack the other battlefield.
So
once you get to the late game and there are big units and big spells getting thrown around, that's when this card is the most impactful. But even in the early and mid game, again, just denying the point or protecting the battlefield is very strong. It does have one issue, which is primarily against Kaisa. If you hide it as one of your earlier hidden cards, and she just drops a Falling Star or an Acathian Rain and wipes your battlefield, it doesn't do anything. So it just disappears without having any effect.
Yeah, you just get almost free for one in that situation. And it's not a reaction, it's only the action speed. So you have to keep the unit for combat effectively before you can... Well, it becomes a reaction when it's set.
Well, when it's hidden, it becomes a reaction, but specifically against the Falling Star and Acathian Rain, since they don't need to target battlefields, you can't. Moving your unit back to base won't save it still. Yeah,
sorry, for some reason in my head I was getting confused with Hextech Ray and Void Seeker, which is very specifically at a battlefield. But yes, Falling Star doesn't matter where your unit is, it gets nuked from orbit. Fight or Flight, solid card, and ends so many positions where your opponent gets jammed on, okay, I have to go all in here, and this is a great all-in ender, where they just accelerate a Watcher at you and you go, I'm just going to push that away from me, and then get my hold points. Love this card.
All right, and then the last 2 drops, Tide Turner. This slot was originally Watchful Sentry. I wanted to have, I guess, as much card draw as possible in the deck, which is why they were originally in there. But what I found is that a lot of the time, either it being 1 might came up as being too weak to hold a battlefield, or it was just too difficult to get him killed. Because in situations where you are holding, your opponent doesn't attack into you, or even if they do, they kill him last. And if your opponent's on the other battlefield, you have to just throw him in and sacrifice him for no value just to get your card back. So that's why Watchful Sentry wasn't good enough. Replacing with Tide Turner. Originally I tried 1 copy, and then it was actually so impressive that just added the second one. The main use case for him is, again, with Dr. Mundo, where he does a similar thing as Fight or Flight, to switch him and let the Dr. Mundo reach both battlefields on the same turn. But has the extra value of it's just a 2-drop that you can play. And then it's a hidden card, so as a last resort, you can hide him with an Ember Monk, and that still ends up being 4 might in total. And then one other thing that he does that's really strong is he lets your ready unit on one battlefield effectively get to ganking, and then reach the other battlefield, which most of the time that's with an Ember Monk as your biggest unit to push with. But if the other battlefield is empty, then it could just be any unit that you switch across. It's similar to the 2-drop from a set 2, the Gem Jammer that gives a unit ganking.
Yeah, that card.
But it has a lot of other really high value
That card is
applications.
super obnoxious. I've seen it being played on with Lucians and stuff like that, and I've got a lot of respect for Gem Jammer going into set 2 for sure.
Okay. Next up, we can talk about the sprites, Sprite Call and Sprite Mother. They're very similar cards, but do have some different applications. The Sprite Call has hidden, so it can be used as a hidden card. The issue is, even if you do win the combat and you prevent your opponent from conquering the battlefield, they're going to kill the sprite last, so you won't keep the battlefield on your next turn either, which is a bit unfortunate, but it does make it a lot more flexible, whereas Sprite Mother, you have to pay the extra power cost, and you have to always use the sprite offensively. But in exchange, you get an extra body on the field.
I really like Sprite's Call, mostly because of the 0 power. Just having a free might, effectively an accelerated unit, you can just send it straight to where it needs to go in the early stages of the game, which is very good against Annie, or as a follow-up after your 2-drop gets killed by something. It's like, actually, this free makes a big difference. I can send that in. And then you can hide stuff as well with that.
Yeah, cheap accelerate units are just very strong. It's a much better card, like Sneaky Deckhand is something that Teemo has played in the past, but this is much better in a lot more situations where it can attack over your opponent's 2-drop. That is a big issue you can have, is if you fall behind as Teemo, you need to do whatever you can to stop your opponent from scoring points, and one of the easy ways to do that is pick off their 2-drops.
Yeah, eating their Sneaky Deckhand with a Sprite's Call is also another great use for it.
Yeah, and then one other thing, the temporary trigger is a trigger that you can respond to, so it's something that actually came up once or twice at Houston, where I hit a card with a sprite, and my opponent thought that if they passed their turn, without giving me a window on their turn to play the hidden card, that the sprite would die and the hidden card would be lost.
Oh no, that's not how that works.
You can respond to it. So even if, ideally you hide a Consult the Past with the Sprite Call, because then you're not really losing anything, but even if you have to hide a Teemo with the Sprite Call, then you still get the chance to flip him on your own turn, then the Teemo will hold. He'll be exhausted and he won't be able to move, but then hopefully you have enough mana to put down another unit and pick him up and rehide him.
Which is just, those micro interactions make a huge difference on whether you win matches or lose or make top cut, is just knowing how the game works. I would recommend that everybody reads their cards and also reads the rulebook to understand all the steps, because just the really minor things like that, like getting an extra hold point or ending your turn thinking, cool, I can blow my opponent's secret.
Your entire turn, yeah.
It's like, ends your whole tournament run.
Difference.
Yeah.
All right, next, Consult the Past.
Free copies. That is a lot. We usually don't see Consult the Past as much anymore. We started off initially, like everybody was playing Consult the Past and everything, and then it just seems to have come down. I think it was for some of the problems you said earlier, right? Whereas you're hiding it. Most people are actually paying power for it, and it's not defending the battlefield.
Oh, true. Yeah, in like a Kaisa deck, they are paying the power cost for it. It's like a MTG players where they love this card. It's just like a 0 mana draw 2 cards sort of card. But losing a rune, a land, effectively makes it a lot more expensive. But in Teemo, it's just 1 mana draw 2 cards, which is quite amazing. And then the opponent always has the risk. Like, they don't know that it's a Consult the Past. Even if they know that you want to hide the Consult the Past first, every single time that you draw it, it's still a 50% chance that you would have drawn it by turn 2 or 3, which means that they're still taking a pretty big risk, making that some kind of an attack that would lose into a hidden Teemo.
Yeah, they have to respect all of your other cards before they can just say, that's just a Consult the Past. Like, at that point, they're gambling, and over a long period for the tournament run, you're going to probably end up losing more games by gambling than you are just going, okay, if I put things in acceptable ranges, I can't attack that battlefield, and then you just get the Consult the Past. And even if it just comes back around to your turn, immediately draw 2, I have 2 extra cards to play with this turn, and then I can hide something else. So it's just all around an all-star in this.
Yeah.
But
it's very rare that there's a player that's willing to flip the game on turn 2 or turn 3 into if it's a Consult the Past, they win, and if it's a Teemo, they lose.
Yeah, against Teemo...
It did happen at Houston, though, on stream.
Oh, really? I just took the attack, and if I actually missed your feature map because it was just so late when I was here. I tried to catch as many as possible.
What happened was, it was on Bandle tree. I went first.
Yeah.
I played a 2-drop. They played a 2-drop. They played a sentry, I think. I went to Bandle tree. I hid Teemo from my champion zone. I hit a card from my hand, and I put another 2-drop in my base. And then they played Red Seal, Darius, and attacked with the Darius into my battlefield.
That is actual madness.
Yeah. So if it was a second Teemo or a Tide Turner hidden, they basically lose the game immediately. If it's a Consult the Past, they're in a very good spot. If it's a Sprite Call, then it's an okay trade for them, but not amazing. And yeah, it was a hidden Consult the Past, so they did basically flip the game there. And then the unfortunate thing added to that too is that the unit in my base was a Ravenbloom student, and I had Stack Deck and Sprite Call in my hand. So I played the Stack Deck, and if I found a Stupefy, I'd be able to clear his entire board anyway. But unfortunately, I didn't, so then I had to use the Sprite Call plus the student to kill his Darius. And then I hit another card with the Sprite, and then he immediately accelerates his Kaisa and sends it into my Sprite. Zero respect, and it was the second Consult the Past, of course. So that was a tragedy. A very fast 2-0 loss in round 2 of Houston.
That's so difficult as well, because you have to, in a way, gauge your opponent's skill level during the game, because unless you sort of have seen them from other events and stuff, you're kind of trying to assume what do they typically respect in games, what are they not respecting. And I know there was a side deck strategy in Kaisa where you actually only bring in the Acafians if you realize they don't respect them in the mirror, and you go, oh cool, they keep putting loads of guys out, I'm now just gonna nuke them. But you also sometimes do that where you like the line is correct, but you're gambling on your opponent doing what they're supposed to do, and if they do what they're not supposed to do and it all goes wrong, you feel kind of, it's a bit tilting. So I don't envy you for being
and
in
it
that
is like it's
situation.
either a very good player or a very bad player takes that flip, or unfamiliar with the matchup player, let's say.
Yeah, and it could be either. That's the thing.
I don't think my opponent was familiar with the matchup. So I asked them afterwards, and they said that they thought the Darius Accelerate would just be like a 2-for-1 worst case scenario. Which
wow, no, it would not have been. It would have been very bad for you. It could have just been fight or flight, and then you'd been like, okay, that's fine, we can continue. Like, so many things could have gone wrong on that. That is tough. So your next card is now we're on the Ember Monk.
This is probably the most unfair card in the deck, but it's also specific to Teemo. No other deck can use it. It's a 4-might for 4 mana, which is bad, but as soon as you get it on a battlefield with a hidden card, now it's a 6-might for 4 mana, and that's already quite unfair. A lot of decks can't deal with it. Obviously, Kaisa can deal with it with Falling Star, but this combined with a hidden Teemo, it beats a Deadbloom Predator.
Yeah.
It beats a Darius. It trades with a Darius with Cleave. It trades with an accelerated Thousand-Tailed Watcher because the Ember Monk has 3 might left and the Teemo is still a 4. So that just suddenly becomes a unbreakable battlefield for 5 mana and 1 card from hand plus your chosen champion. So that's what really makes the deck work. It's what makes you able to get to the late game for Dr. Mundo, and I mean it often wins the game on its own. There was the one match I played at Orlando on stream where it was my game on Bandle Tree, and I managed to set up, I don't remember if I think I got all 3 Ember Monks, and 2 turns in a row I had 3 hidden cards, and my opponent played Bryn here, forced me to flip them all. All of my Ember Monks went to 10 might, and then they passed their turn because they couldn't do anything. And then I went to my turn, I picked up Teemo, re-hit him, hid 2 more cards, and then they retreated their Bryn here on their turn, replayed her, I flipped all the hidden cards again, and then I think they just conceded immediately.
I don't expect to lose games where I play Bryn here, which says my opponent can't play cards for the rest of the turn. I don't expect to lose those games. That's quite hilarious, actually. But yeah, Ember Monk's great. I saw a few people playing it with like Yasuo as well, with all of the same purple kind of hidden cards and tricks. Like, I think this is just a card that gets better as we get more hidden cards that have great value, especially into Spirit Forge. There's some incredible tools.
There are a couple of set 2 cards that are very nice, and it's so nice that it doesn't have a power cost as well. You're not paying power cost for him, you're not paying power cost to hide. So there are some games where everything is just going so smoothly, and you never pay a power cost the entire early and mid game, and you're still ahead on board because of Ember Monk.
And that in itself is already an indicator when you can just quickly take a look at the game and go, am I winning or losing? And it's like, okay, I have rune advantage, I have basically board advantage, I have point advantage. Okay, yeah, definitely. And just not sacrificing runes. I think that is, for any of the listeners who are looking to get better, it's trying to find ways to not spend runes is probably one of the most important things, especially earlier on in the game, unless you are getting something significant for it, because it does, each of these little sacrifices do set you back massively. And we've seen that.
It is a mistake that players make where they accelerate their Kaisa too early, or they're playing something like Legion Rearguard and they accelerate it too early, or even Falling Star. If it's not a very high value Falling Star, that can still put you far behind on Kaisa, where you get an early lead and it feels good for a couple of turns, and then you realize, oh, my opponent's had 2 more mana than me every turn.
They're outspending me.
And they're catching back up to me.
And the player who spends the most energy is usually the player that wins the game. So being at a deficit for several turns can always be really tough to come back from if your opponent is more efficiently not spending power or just spending it to tip the balance when they need to. And yeah, what's interesting is that we've also like skipped 5 and 6 cost units and just gone straight from that sort of early straight up to the end game with the 5 Publishers and Mundo.
To be fair, every deck skips 5 and 6 cost units. They're very bad against Falling Star.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
And they're also pretty bad against Singularity, which is the next card. This was originally not in the deck at all, but I was finding that Kaisa was the most difficult matchup and just needed some way to recover on board after the Kaisa wiped my board completely, where either she uses Falling Star or Cathian Rain or clears out the battlefield I was holding. And then she has 2 points on battlefields that are threatening to hold and score 2 more points again next turn. And Singularity was the effectively only solution to that problem. It does have an issue where Kaisa's play Retreat, and that can be that can just give her more value when you go for Singularity, and she just saves her Kaisa, accelerates it back out again the next turn. But one other thing with the card is it actually ends up being very relevant in a lot of other matchups. Against Annie, it's amazing. Annie can't save her units from this with a flash.
Yep.
Or a Fight or Flight. And then against even Master Yis are playing Fey Folk, even in Aurora, so it still has good targets there. Against a more mid-range Master Yi, you get some decent targets. Against Set, it can be useful, where you can, at the very minimum, take a buff off of their orange Set when they save him and kill another unit. So it just ended up being a really solid card in most matchups, and then in the matchups where it's not great and you can sideboard it out.
Yeah, this is actually just a really interesting card, and I think it does, from my experience of playing with Singularity, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, is that this feels very good when you're almost ahead. I don't really like this so much as a catch-up card because of the power cost, the double blue mind runes that you have to take away, and then your opponent, you go, okay, I spend my whole turn, set myself back a turn on mana to kill 2 guys, and then they play 2 guys, and you're like, okay, I'm back in the same position I was just in. And it feels like if you've got like a lot of guys out and you're already winning and your opponent's trying to mount a counter offensive in their base, you've got the ability to just nuke them. I feel like that's where it's the strongest. But it's interesting to hear you using it as a catch-up card against Kaisa, because I guess it just shoots the Darius, it can threaten the Kaisa, and then it blows their retreat and can just clear a battlefield so that you can actually get onto them as well. But yeah, Singularity, really cool.
Yeah,
card.
and it is a card you really don't want to play as soon as you hit 6 mana, because then you do often get stuck in the same spot again. If you have a unit on board already, then it's not bad, because then that one unit can start scoring. Or if you have 8 mana, you can play it and develop a unit at the same time. But it is, the double power cost cards. You really need to avoid getting stuck in the situation where you're answering the board state for one turn, but the next turn you're going to be in the exact same situation again with the exact same amount of mana available to you.
Yeah, and the opponent's just gained a 2 energy ramp on you.
Yeah. Occasionally they can run out of units though, which is one potential way that you can get out of those situations where, you're backed into a corner, you have to play it because you don't have anything else to even do with your hand. Yeah. But hopefully you play 2 Singularities in a row, and then they sit there and look at their hand of 5 spells, and then they pass their turn. And then you've got a chance to catch up after that.
Just grinding them out with multiple nukes. It's just a big falling star, really, when you think about it. Not quite as good, but I do appreciate this card for what it does. A lot of consideration going into when playing it as well, which makes it pretty good.
And then there are a lot of situations where the opponent can break the battlefield that you've set up that you're holding. But in order to do so, they have to spend all of their mana and tap out completely. And then this is a really good card for counter swinging and then wiping everything that they used that was left over, like a Darius.
Yeah, real high value targets, being able to pick those off, especially after your opponent had to respond. You can put your opponent in a position where if they don't do anything, you just win, and then you can follow up with Singularity to take their comeback away. I like that. And then we've got Thousand-Tailed Watcher, and we've talked a lot about Mundo as well.
Yeah, so Thousand-Tailed Watcher, and this is similar to Stupefy. I don't think a blue deck exists that doesn't play this card. Probably one of the strongest cards in set 1. That, along with Falling Star, probably the 2 most obvious ones.
Yeah, this card...
the main point is it's a similar counter swing as Singularity, where your opponent overextends pushing your battlefield, and then you just drop this and wipe them back off. It also has some good value where you don't accelerate it, and you use a unit in your base to push instead. And then it can also pair very well with Mundo. The situation where I mentioned where your opponent all-in attacks your Mundo, and you fight him back to your base. And now all of their units are all on one battlefield, where they just attack the Mundo. And then Watcher can just come back in and clean them all up with the Mundo together.
Yeah, Watcher is an insane card. It's also the 7 might just puts it just out of range for a lot of the really efficient removal to actually deal with it. So it can win. It just wins games all by itself. Although I am curious with all of the tools in set 2, and we'll talk a little bit about set 2 a little bit later on in the video, but I'm curious to see if this card still stands as one of the stronger cards when you've got cards in purple such as Switcheroo, which lets you just swap the might stats on 2 units. So you can basically take Watcher's power and give the Watcher the reduced power that it gave you. And there's a lot of other tricks that makes Watcher less game-ending, I guess. But I'll be interested to see if we still see as much Watcher, or if people start being more cautious about just auto-including it in blue decks.
I mean, I think if Watcher was, you were forced to pay the accelerate cost every time you played it, it would be a bit worse. But since you can just play it as a unit and get the value out of it other ways, combo it with a Falling Star, combo with what other units that you already have in play or some other spell, it's pretty difficult for it to not be a staple.
Yeah, solid card, and definitely deserves the price tag I think that was on it before the event. I think the secondary market was going crazy to try and pick up Thousand-Tailed Watchers, from what I remember at least. And then Mundo.
And Mundo. I think that this is the only deck in set 1 that can play Mundo effectively. Part of the reason for that is purple effects to move him around are quite important and to protect him. And the other reason for that is that a deck like Kai'Sa can't fuel him every turn, where he's recycling 3 cards from trash every turn, and Kai'Sa can maybe get 2 cards in trash. So a deck like Kai'Sa, he's going to get smaller every turn, which means that your opponent has some time, where if the game isn't immediately over, which it probably isn't since they took an entire turn to play Mundo, then if they can wait a couple turns, he'll get small enough to be dealt with. Whereas this deck, with all of the 1-mana cards and cycling effects, he very rarely gets smaller, and he can sometimes even get bigger, even while he's in play.
Yeah, it just wins. Again, it's another card that just takes control of the game and presents your opponent with, if you can't answer this, I just win. And it's going to be very difficult for you to move into.
Yeah, I mean, if they can't conquer both battlefields in a turn, then their only options are holding or using Time Warp.
Yeah.
And I mean, Time Warp's tough, but holding, if you can move him around, then that solves that problem. So a lot of decks just can't win the game once he comes down.
Which is exactly the position you want to be in the tournament, is when your opponent's forced to find the answer, not you. That's the side of the table you want to be sat on.
Yeah, and it's a very consistent win condition where, regardless of what happened in the early game, you could be down at 0 points and your opponent's at 5 or 6. You put them down on the table, and then you say, yeah, you can't win the game anymore. So it might take me a while for me to win, but you aren't going to win.
Yeah, that's also very demoralizing when that happens to you. You're just like, yep, I just could not answer a Mundo for 4 turns straight, and they just scored 8 points. Just having cards like that is just really, having tools like that, especially when you've got such a control setup with your hidden cards, and the way that you can actually get there early and cause problems, and then your late game isn't just like non-existent. It's like, yeah, you have to worry about me at all stages of the game with this deck, which I really like. Let's dive into the sideboard. So, interestingly, you've gone for a lot of one-offs here, which are just basically additional copies of cards already in your deck. So, it seems like you've kind of gone with the sideboard is in the main board, and then you just increase the stuff that's working and decrease the stuff that isn't working.
Yeah, it follows with the Zon Warren's plan, where you can have a few sideboard quotation mark cards in the main deck, and then switch them around after game 1 to the real configuration that you want. Gust is a card where other Teemo decks play 3 copies even in the main deck, which is, I don't think I would do that. I might play 2 in the main deck now with Annie being so popular. The one issue I have with the card is Pouty Poro is a very popular 2-drop.
Yeah, it's a very good one.
You do not want to play Gust on that. And then there's a bit of overlap between Gust and the sprites where they answer similar things. And then especially because of Pouty Poro, I'd rather rely on sprites than Gust in general.
Yeah, I can respect that. Paying a power to put a Pouty Poro back in your opponent's hand that they're very comfortable just playing and then leaving mana open if they need to, or just holding on to, is not, it's just awful. Just an awful play.
Yeah, and Kai'Sa in general does not have many Gust targets after the Pouty Poro. Like, she has her other 2-drops, the Students and the Sentries, and then she has Lecturing Yordles.
Yeah, you don't want
that is it. Unless you can combo a Stupefy with the Gust, you're not going to hit any other units.
Yeah, you do not want to be gusting a Lecturing Yordle. So this is kind of really interesting, because then you've got Raz of the Sunderer in the side deck, but your preferred game 1 is the Zone Warrens, and that's kind of where this card would excel. So when does this actually come into your deck? Like, which game?
It comes in against the slower matchups, so against hold decks like Master Yi or Ari or other Teemos, and also in matchups where Mundo is not going to be reliable, so against yellow and purple decks, against Annie and Victor and stuff like that. also against Darius. The issue is, this is actually one of the changes I made after Houston, is I took him out for a Mind Splitter, because I was running into the problem where I would draw him early, and my turn would just look like I could do nothing, so I would play him for 6 or 7 mana as my play, and that was just very lackluster as a play. Whereas Mind Splitter can be played in similar spots and is useful in the same matchups, but is always going to have a strong effect, whereas Rasa is going to take a while to still come online, especially in the hold matchups where you're not trading too many resources on board, you're both sitting there looking at each other. It does take a while for your trash to fill up.
Yeah, just building a little fort, going, okay, no, I'm not yet, hang on, I'll tell you when I'm ready, Okay, now we're ready to play. It's
a bit sad, because that was my pet card, where I had 3 copies in the main deck originally, and now he's gone. It's just...
Maybe he comes
fine.
back.
He'll come back. Maybe set 2 or set 3 with the shovel, perhaps. Last Rites.
Yeah, Last Rites.
Maybe he'll be good.
Great card. It's an equipment that lets you get units back out of your trash. It just costs 2 to equip, and then you basically and also you have to return 2 cards from your trash to your deck. And then if you conquer or hold, you get to pay the cost to bring something back. And Raza, obviously at that point, probably costing 0. So it's just like, cool, pay a power, get a 6 might unit just by existing. And that feels really, really strong. So let's talk about the mulligans in the early game. Basically, if you could choose any 4 cards to have in your opening hand, like your dream opening hand, what does it look like, and how are we aiming to get there, effectively?
Okay. What would be the ideal? I think I would definitely want an Ember Monk.
Yeah.
I would want a Consult the Past. If I'm going second, a Lecturing Yordle would be good. But otherwise, it would be probably Ravenbloom Student plus Stupefy would be the perfect 4-card hand. If I can't do that, a Traveling Merchant would still be fine, or a stack deck instead of the Stupefy. Depending on the matchup, Gust when going second along with a 2-drop would be very acceptable as well. So, and then ideally drawing into the sprites and other cards off of the Consult the Past to
the cards you can't play immediately, draw them and then play them when you can. So here's always the question that comes up for newer players or players that are trying to improve at the game is, like, do you mulligan a Mundo? Because you will probably never see it again. Well, I mean, you've got the stack decks and stuff, but... Yeah.
Since the deck is only playing 2 copies, you can't mulligan him. That is a drawback, where if he's in your opening hand, or you see him with a stack deck, and it's a matchup where you need him, you have to take him immediately. If it's the first Mundo you've seen. If you were playing 3 copies, then you could afford to mulligan him or put him away with stack deck, because there's still 2 left to find. But with only 2 copies, if you see one and don't take it, and you only have 1 left in your entire deck, it severely reduces your odds of being able to find him.
Does that same logic apply to the Thousand-Tailed Watcher, or are you more happy to just throw those back?
No, you're not as reliant on the Watcher for the game. It's a card you want to show up late in the late game, but you don't need a Thousand-Tailed Watcher to win the game in most matchups, any matchup really. It's more of a value card or like a backup win condition after Mundo.
In your opening hand, if you drew 2 Thousand-Tailed Watchers, do you throw them both back, or do you keep 1? I guess it depends on the matchup.
It would depend a bit on the matchup. Like if it's against a Master Yi, I'd rather keep a Thousand-Tailed Watcher than a Sprite.
Yeah.
Or if I see 2 Thousand-Tailed Watchers and 1 Singularity, I'd rather keep the first, or one of the 2 Thousand-Tailed Watchers than the first of 2 Singularities. But in general with the deck, I mean, there's a few cards that are there primarily for late game. Like the Watchers, the Singularities, the Fighter Flights, and Guerrilla Warfare, where those are the ones that you mostly mulligan.
Yeah.
But otherwise, especially in like the faster matchups like Kaisa, you can't afford to have any dead cards in your hand, or you need to have as few as possible. So anything playable from all of the other cards, you would just hold on to.
Yeah, again,
assuming you have a unit to play on turn 1, that is the most important thing. If you don't have that, you have to mulligan as much as you can.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's much better to just keep a mediocre hand with like 3 2-drops and a Sprite than it is to mulligan some of those cards away and then draw into a Watcher, a Singularity, or a Mundo.
I do like that logic, actually, because one of the things that I've been doing with mulligans is I'm like, okay, cool, my turn 2 play is secured. I now want to dig for stuff that I'm going to need in the match a little bit later, as opposed to just saying, it's actually better for me to just smooth my entire play lines out so that I've got multiple ways of playing on every turn, as opposed to, okay, I've got 1 turn set up, I'm going to try and sort out my next turn. Just having that, I'm going to do something now.
I think it is a bit of a privilege of the deck to be able to do that, though.
Yeah, okay.
Where you have the card selection to be able to say, oh, I drew too many 2-drops, but I can get rid of some of them. Or to be able to say that I drew too many Sprites, but I can get rid of some. or I have this stack deck, let me find the hidden card that I'm missing to really put this together. It's not so much like a Kaisa where you're mulliganing all of your cards to try to find a Falling Star probably, or a Hextech Ray in order to get early game tempo, or an Annie where you're mulliganing as much as you can to find your early drop, and then probably a Kaisa to accelerate out.
Yeah, like I guess that's it's a deck building. It's a real deck building conundrum, and I like that you're more flexible in that sense. And I did wonder if it was like maybe my understanding fundamentally of what I should be trying to do in a game is wrong, but it depends entirely on your deck and how your deck is actually trying to win versus whether or not you should just keep stuff that you can immediately play versus holding on to looking for key cards that you're going to need later. I guess you also got, as you mentioned, you got all the stat decks, stupefies.
And you're not in a rush to find those key cards.
Yeah, as
you're going to
other decks.
See, if it's a card you're going to need on the third or fourth turn in the game, you're going to have seen 10 additional cards by then. So you've got very good odds already of getting there. It's just making sure that your first 2 or 3 turns can go smoothly before then.
So my next question for you is about basically the way you would evaluate a Teemo player. Trying to find the difference between what makes a good Teemo player, let's say somebody who goes 5-4 at Houston, slightly better than average record, and then a great one. Like, what are the ways you can level up your Teemo game to getting to that position where you could potentially hitting the top cut?
I think a big one is knowing your loss condition and what you can afford to play around and what you can't. Time Warp is a big one where sometimes in the Kaisa matchup you can be behind and you have a Mundo in hand and you have to figure out, can I play this Mundo and just say I'm going to lose the Time Warp for, let's say, the next 1 or 2 turns if they have it? Or can I make this other play that maybe I won't lose to Time Warp immediately, but am I still going to lose to Time Warp 2 turns from now instead? And just making that kind of evaluation, similar against Annie, where you need to decide if they have Vi Ride the Wind, can I actually beat that card? Do I need to hold on to this Fight or Flight for a few turns to give me that chance? Or am I just losing to that at this point and I need to make the best plays I can and then just say that they don't have it? So I don't have a chance of winning this game.
How do you do that in the heat of the moment? Is that from like repetitions and just playing practice games? Or are you just so familiar with the card pool that you can look at it and go, okay, this is the entirety of what they could have without knowing their list, and I've got to play around all of them? Or is it just a case of you've repped the games out where you go, this is the thing that's important? Like, how do you get to that point?
I think the card pool is limited enough that you can memorize the specific cards or card combinations that are really like game-ending combos. Time Warp is just a one-card thing where you can count. Will they have 10 runes, and will they have the points and units needed to get to 8? And then Vi Ride the Wind is similar, where at least do they have enough cards in their trash to make her big enough?
Yeah, and again, being in purple with the same sort of strategy, with the scrap heaps, traveling merchants, stack decks, they are going to see it eventually. So that's like a sure thing. It's not like they're going to completely miss it. You've gotten very lucky if they've missed that. So just being able to just look at it and go, okay, I lose to this, can I play around it? Or do I just have to say, if they have it, they have it? That's a really good skill.
Yeah.
So let's go. This has been a great overview of the deck. I want to talk a little bit about Spirit Forged and where things are going, because I'm interested from you, because obviously we've got Ezreal entering in on the Mind and Chaos side of things. Are you thinking of switching to Ezreal? Are you thinking I'm actually going to take the new tools and put them in Teemo? Or are you looking at something completely different at this point? Like, what's getting you really excited about that next set?
I haven't done too much experimentation, and I do think the switcheroo card in Spirit Forged is...
The card is so dirty.
Very strong.
It's so
very
dirty.
strong. And it does have the issue where your opponent does need to present you with a combat for it to get value as a hidden card. So against Kaisa and Annie, they can counterplay it a lot of the time. But it's a card that could potentially just be a complete replacement for Rebuke. It could be played in the main deck as at least a one of. And play it as just from hand, even though it's very expensive, it's also very swingy. And that's a big answer to Vi Ride the Wind as well, where you can just take the Vi's numbers.
It's just
and
so...
make her...
Yeah, it's so good in the stat check decks. Like things like Set as well. Just like, okay, yeah, you're not... I'll just take your big number, or you've committed to a Primal Strength or a new card Punch First, which just gives you +5.
Punch First, yeah.
You're like, yeah, I'll swap that. We can swap those mites and just get those massive blowouts. I think Switcheroo is an incredible card in Set 2. I'm also a huge fan of Edge of Night, the hidden equip card, which you can hide it, and when you reveal it, you can just attach it to a unit that was at that battlefield, and it just gives +2. I think that's also really strong as a hidden card. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it could be useful maybe against the Kaisa matchup, I think, because it's a lot lower value than a hidden Teemo. It's only 2 might instead of 4, and the equip cost is very expensive, especially for a deck that's trying to draw a lot of cards and play bigger cards and bigger units overall. But if you're using it against spells, like against the Falling Star, if you hide this with an Ember Monk, then you actually survive Falling Star, which is a really big deal. And you could survive like a Void Seeker, you could survive maybe a Gust, things like that.
Yeah. So are you gonna be sticking to the Teemo, or are you is there another Legends that you?
I'm
think
not
you're gonna
sure
go with?
yet. Because part of the reason I do think Teemo is a really good deck. I think that I should have placed better at Houston. I should have gotten probably at least top 16, and I wouldn't have played the deck if I didn't think it could place very highly at the tournament. But part of the reason for it again is because of the best of prizing, and I'm not sure in set 2 if they will do best of prizing for every legend or only the legends from set 2. So that is something to consider, but I'll definitely be working on him and trying to figure out what he needs in set 2.
I'm really hoping that they do have the set 1 Legends in Italy. Otherwise, Europe never got a chance to get any of the set 1 ones, but I do appreciate that for everybody who won one in Houston, it would devalue them a little bit. Well, significantly, because there'd be 2 copies of all of the Legends being given out. So Riot is in a bit of a tough spot there. They might just say, yeah, we're going to set 2, each region, your first regional gets the metal cards for the new set, and that would preserve their value, but it's a tough position.
Or they could do unique ones, even if it is another set 1 legend metallic. It could still be
they're all tart, like
its own an alt art.
But would you be really annoyed if you go, yeah, I won the standard one, and the guys over in like Australia or something got the alt one? I guess if they announced up front what they were doing, then it wouldn't be quite as bad. But yeah, it's an interesting situation, and I think that's actually one of the best things Riot's done for organized play, is creating artificial diversity by having this best of prizing, so that you've got an encouragement to just play the deck that you actually want to play and can potentially receive like a massive payout effectively, or rather this really valuable prize for, even if you go like 5 losses or something, you just happen to be the best Lux player in the room, you get the prize.
I think every best of had probably a 6-3 record at Houston. There maybe 5-4 for like Garen or something like that, but I'm not sure. I think people have compiled that information, like the placements of every best of deck and player.
Yeah, I imagine there's a list or something out there so people can find where they all are for collectors and stuff like that, just because people love tracking all of that information. But next I want to talk a little bit about your coaching and teaching. So you, over on Metafy, you are offering coaching for Riftbound. I was wondering if you'd like to take a minute to talk to us a bit about that and what that entails.
Yeah, so I started offering coaching, I think, a couple of weeks before I left to Houston. So I've been doing that for a bit. I did some coaching in previous games as well, so I've got some experience with that. So anyone that's interested, working on either gameplay or deck building, sideboarding, or set 2 theory crafting, anything like that, can go look at my Metafy. And then I'm also working on a Teemo guide with Randy, which is almost ready to be released and should be done by tomorrow. But hopefully I will finish it today.
And tomorrow is probably in the past by the time this episode goes out. As we're recording this on the 17th of December.
I should say dates. 17th of December, so 18th of December. So by the time you hear this, it will be released and you'll be able to go take a look.
That's super exciting. I'm really happy to see like a proper detailed guide coming out of this. But for like the coaching, do you tailor it to players? Like, do you have like a fixed process, or is it you just ask them what they would like to learn, or do you say, okay, this is what we're going to go through, this is where we're going to coach it? Is it more like a PT session, or is it kind of more tell me what you want to get good at and then we'll figure it out? Like
it's more like the latter, where people come and they say, I want to work on this matchup, or I want to work on this deck, or tell me about your Teemo deck list or this other deck list and how this works. Where really they bring what their goals are, and then we can work on them together.
Nice. So where else on the internet can people find you? Like where should we come see it? Because I see you usually get really big numbers on Twitch. Whenever people are playing Riftbound, there's more people watching you play than they are watching the official streams for those tournaments. So obviously Twitch, but where else can people find you if they want to see more of your content or get in touch?
So twitch.tv/Prismat, that's my Twitch channel. And then Twitter is at Prismaticism, just a second ISM at the end of it. So I tweet occasionally. I'm getting into the Twitter game and the social media game again, so need to warm back up to that. But tweet occasionally about tournaments or other things that are going on. And then I do have a Discord server as well, which I guess I can't link to that directly through here, but
you cannot.
You can
but
find
I can.
the link. You can find the links to it through my Twitch primarily, but I should also add that to my Twitter.
Yeah, we'll also include all the links in the description down below, including a link to the Piltover archive deck list, so you can go check everything out for yourself. And I feel like that's a great place to wrap things up. But before we finish, there's one thing that I'm going to start doing at every episode, and you get to be the second person to do this, is I'd like you to leave a question for the next person who's going to come on the show. Something about Riftbound deck building. Their personal life probably not so relevant, so what would be like a question that you would leave for them? And that's going to be the first question I ask them on the next episode.
And I don't know who it's going to be.
No. That's the part of the surprise. Okay. So it could be anybody.
How far in the future will the next person be?
I'm trying to schedule them in for this week or next week. They are. Okay, they were sick. So there's two people that I'm currently in conversations with, and then there's obviously Christmas, holiday season, I should say, and then January. But yours will probably be going out for the next guest. Your question.
Okay. What is the most underrated card in set 2?
Ooh, that's a good one, because we can definitely use that as some rage bait for people, and those get clicks. But it'd be, or I can just
maybe underrated and overrated card.
Overrated and
be a paired.
Underrated. Yeah. Okay. No, I like that. And right, that's going to be it from our side, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're looking forward to bringing you more great content. We'd encourage you to go check out everything that Prismat's got. And it's honestly an incredible run. Congratulations again on all the successes you've had over the previous weeks. It's been probably a bit crazy with all the traveling and stuff, and you're probably just happy to sort of relax for the rest of the holiday season. But we're going to sign it off here now. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.